All right, welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown. We're looking ahead to Celtic's second leg clash with FC Midtjylland. As it stands, it is 1-1, no away goals rule, so there is still hope going into this. Joko James and Alan Morrison are on the line with me as always. Lads, how's it getting on?
Hiya. All right.
Afternoon, guys.
So it's been a busy day and a busy day of rumors. Rumors. The latest rumor is that Scott Bain is starting in goals tonight. Vasilius Barkas has been dropped. That is just a rumor. It's not confirmed. We'll find out in about an hour's time when we see the team news. But even bigger news today is that Joe Hart is potentially coming to Celtic. That is the latest transfer rumor rolling around in the newspapers and online that Joe Hart, it was a rumor last year, I believe, and it's resurfaced. And I have to take some of the blame, lads. I'll hold up my hand. I did tell the story of the time that Pep Guardiola sold Joe Hart because he couldn't play football. And maybe somebody in Celtic were listening to the podcast and thought that I was being positive about Joe Hart. But I wasn't. I wasn't being positive about Joe Hart. Joe Hart can't play football with his feet. But there it is. Celtic are rumored to be signing Joe Hart. And it seems to be like really picking up steam. So it's very interesting that this has come in a time where Celtic badly need a goalkeeper who is going to need to play football. So, James, I think you've been doing a lot of work on this today on Twitter. So, I guess, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, the hard aspect of it today, I've started digging in on the keeper front more so last week, and it had less to do with Barkas or Bain or any specific keeper that we have or that we're being speculated as maybe bringing in, as more so trying to delve into the question of, okay, what profile of a keeper makes sense relative to how the manager is likely to play. And so that was kind of my initial question. And when I started really diving into that from an analytical perspective, and asking questions within that context, I didn't know. Like, that's the point. I didn't have a strong feeling one way or the other relative to the relative importance of ball playing skills. Let's call it non-shot stopping aspects of keeper play, right? So the response I've gotten is being bombarded with people saying, well, the keeper's primary, first, most important job is keeping the ball out of the net or shot stopping. I think that's how most people were thinking of it. And that's intuitive. That's, sometimes consensus thinking is logical and true. So I wanted to test that, but not only test it within the context of keepers in general, what's the proportionality of, kind of non-shot stopping and its importance, but then trying to theorize what it might be within the context of how Ange uses his keepers and whether that relationship, let's call it, scales in a linear sense, meaning that, if a keeper is going to touch the ball 15 times in kind of a normal side, and in an Ange system, he's going to touch the ball 35 times, is that difference linear? Meaning that if he's a little below average in ball playing skills, is the relative negative aspects of that going to be consistent from 15 to 35, or is that going to get worse? Meaning that you expose it more, you put more stress on it, you put more pressure on top of the passing. Is that going to end up turning into a bigger problem than you might think, just because the keeper may not be great with his feet, so to speak, playing in a system that's not Ange's? So that's basically what I started to do. And with my new writing gig with the Celtic Way, I get access to StatsBomb data and their metrics, which are different and more sophisticated and advanced within the context of keeper analysis, in particular, things that I hadn't seen before. So that gave me a lot of fun things to do for the last, when you're a dork like me, for the last 4 or 5 days. And, a piece I wrote for the Celtic Way was less so, I'm not making an argument for Barkas. I'm not making an argument for Bain. I am making an argument against Hart, but, or I will, but it's more so, okay, this is what this profile probably suggests and what kind of keeper you're going to get. And if you can't get Manuel Neuer, who's a good shot stopper and a really good sweeper keeper, or you can't get Ederson from Man City, I mean, we kind of start at that level and then you work your way down. And the question is, okay, what relative balance between shot stopping and all this other stuff, and what's the relative importance? Because you're not going to get optimal, most likely. Yeah. So that's basically what I've been working on. And I don't have access to all of the kind of data that I'd like on Hart. So I don't know. I mean, you say he's terrible with his feet. He's not a good ball player. I wasn't watching English football at that time. I don't know enough about him anecdotally, so I can only go off of what I see more so in Y Scout, which is more limited. But from what I've seen so far, the profile doesn't seem to fit with what I would want. I think the risks there are, again, back to this issue of process, which is if he was being looked at last summer to play in a Neil Lennon system, that to me throws up huge red flags that all of a sudden he's also the profile. Like they're mutually exclusive. Like the guy, Fraser Forster is not the profile. So I think Hart's like a 1B, a plan B for Forster, similar, at least in the same neighborhood theoretically of a profile, but nowhere near or in the direction of a Neuer or Ederson. You know what I mean? Yeah, so that's I don't see the coherence there, and that to me is, it's been an issue and continues to be an issue, and to me that's the bigger red flag.
Alan, there's a reason why your name is Celtic by Numbers. You also have your own site, your own blog that you give your own views there. So you were writing about Hart and the goalkeeper situation as well recently. So I guess initial thoughts on this and the general thinking in Celtic that Joe Hart is the man that they come up with as a potential replacement for Barkas.
Yeah. So yeah, and just for new viewers, I mean, the data that I collect is my own, so it doesn't, I suppose, just to make that clear. So I'm not using Y Scout or StatsBomb or anything like that. The benefit that gives, I suppose, is that I can benchmark Celtic players against themselves. So as the more history data you get, you're benchmarking them against a very consistent set of data. But having said that, that it does make it tricky sometimes to benchmark against, like, for example, Y Scout, because even if the definitions are broadly the same, the way that the person has collected that data could be a little bit different. So anyway, don't want to get too deep into that. But essentially, yeah, I mean, firstly on Hart, I agree with, I think, where James is going to go with this, which is it makes very little sense if you look at its sort of system and process over personnel. Joe Hart was replaced as Manchester City's goalkeeper about 5 years ago when Guardiola came in, because Guardiola wanted basically an extra outfield player on occasions and someone that can play out for the back. I mean, Joe Hart's career as a top class goalkeeper pretty much ended 5 years ago, which is quite a long time. And although he's not old for a goalkeeper, he's only 34. Therefore, like Gordon was out the game for 2 years and still performed tremendously well for Celtic. So I wouldn't necessarily say that him being 34, or even the fact that he hasn't played that much, isn't necessarily the be all and end all. The point is that both for England, for whom he has 75 caps, and for Manchester City, for whom he won a lot of trophies and was the first choice goalkeeper for many years, his form kind of collapsed around about that 2016 period, culminating in the goal that he conceded against Iceland in the European Championships. And then there was 2 free kicks that Griffiths then scored against him for Scotland. And there was a feeling in the game that, he wasn't making the saves he should. He was particularly vulnerable on his left-hand side to longer shots. Now, every goalkeeper potentially has a weak spot. I mean, Barkas's relatively poor foot movement on facing long shots was something which the Cynic and team, I think, highlighted before he was signed, and that came to fruition against AC Milan when he was beaten by the free kick and his foot movement was poor. So, but what was I suppose a bit more incredible with Hart, from being Manchester City, the top club in England, and England's number one, his career literally collapsed 5 years ago, and it hasn't recovered, other than some loan appearances for various sides. So even for that reason alone, it's an incredibly odd direction to go in. I mean, other than, there might be a sort of Moneyball angle that says this guy's been undervalued for 5 years. He was clearly brilliant 5 years ago. Now no one wants him. Maybe we've got a bargain. I could almost kind of understand a little bit of that thinking, I suppose. But again, I'm an evidence-based guy, and I can't see the evidence that you'd fit into Postecoglou's style, or that even at a most basic, fundamental goalkeeping competency level, that he's the direction that Celtic should go in, and certainly not probably from a cost effectiveness level.
Yeah, this is the Huddle breakdown. Do get involved in the comments. There's a couple of comments coming in already. Mazar Yousaf is saying that Joe Hart is not the answer, arguably not as good as Foster. Between the years of 2010-15, both have similar frames for their contracts. Both Forster, but Forster is on a higher weekly wage. Both have poor distribution. Yeah, I'd probably agree with all that. Mark O'Brien is saying that we need 2 keepers at least, expecting tonight to be Eddie's last game too. Probably is looking by the transfer rumors around him, and Brighton Hove Albion seems to be the club that he's going to. In terms of Joe Hart, I mean, where I stand on him is just, it just seems incredibly lazy. It seems like the guy, whoever is doing the scouting or whoever is doing the searching for these players, seems to be living in the year 2010. I mean, we're looking at, Fraser Forster coming in first, and I mean, he was good back 10 years. We're talking 10 years ago. This is a different decade of football. It's a completely different thing. I mean, what do we like Joe Hart? We're seriously thinking that Joe Hart, who was England's top goalkeeper 10 years ago. And Alan, I know you mentioned that he was at City 5 years ago. He was on decline then. He was still, there was challenges coming in from other keepers for England's goal place. And I'm just like, is this guy just a Celtic da here that's picking out the whatever players that seems to come to mind? Or is he actually looking at what Celtic need, what Ange needs? And it's incredibly frustrating for me, because Barkas is taking so much stick, right? Barkas is inevitably going to be dropped if he continues these performances. The fans have not taken to them. And the answer is Joe Hart, who cannot kick the ball. He was sold and kept out of the City team by a player who couldn't keep the ball out of the net, but Pep Guardiola refused to play him because he didn't suit the system. That's what we need. We need a keeper who's going to be able to play the system. We have to get past this idea of just getting these names in to fill a gap short term, because that's what Joe Hart is.
Well, part of what I wrote about, and part of why I think this is so weird, is we're not just talking about Ange's system being like Pep Guardiola's, or that Celtic has the same competitive dynamics in the Scottish League as Manchester City does in the EPL. They don't. I mean, neither of those things are true. Ange's keeper play, his keepers in Japan touch the ball 30 to 35 times a game at least, as far as passes that they made. Ederson's are in the low 20s. Manuel, that's more than Neuer plays at Bayern Munich, which I documented. So not only is that side of it extreme, meaning that the amount that Ange's keepers are involved in sweeping and build-up play, and getting out towards, and we heard about this from the Japanese journalists, in the frenzy when Ange was originally appointed, and people were, voraciously consuming all of this content to try and learn who he was and how he might set up a team. One of the things that some of the journalists in Japan were saying was, you're going to be blown away with how different he uses his keeper. So there's that aspect of it. But the second part of it is Celtic keepers just do not face many shots. It is inordinately low compared to most leagues and teams in leagues. So you're talking about 50%, 30% of what they're going to face at other clubs. So, for example, Hart, when he was at Burnley, he was decent shot stopping that season. That's the one season using the Y-Scout post-shot XG metrics. Again, all of Alan's points are valid. The data capture there is not, passed down from God as far as being accurate. But that was the one season out of his last 5 where he performed reasonably well on a shot stopping basis, meaning better than Barkas did last season. So if that's our threshold, right? The other 4, he did not, meaning that if you just look at kind of that shot stopping metric, he was worse than Barkas was last season at Celtic in those other 4 seasons at Torino and his other stops. He faced almost 6 shots a game in that season at Burnley. That's a level of activity that is triple what he's probably going to face, maybe a little less than triple what he's going to face as Celtic keeper. So there's a question about, activity. I mean, that could be a part of the problem that Barkas has had. It's just a different, how do you stay focused when you're basically standing, 70 yards away from the action, like Forster did most of the season in 1920, because we were a dominant team with a really good defense, and the ball just didn't get to him that much. So, and Barkas only faced about 1.8 shots in his league games last season. That is crazy low. So I think it's a logical question to ask, okay, if that's the composition here, 35 touches and playing sweeper keeper and a huge component of the manager's system versus facing maybe 2.5 shots a game on target over here, that's not the same as touching the ball 20 times over here and facing 6 shots. It just isn't. So how do you, and that's what I did. I did a lot of research and, trying to kind of build my own little model to look at how that might equate. And I think it's counterintuitive. And I think it's probably not what most people were thinking in that balance. And it's understandable that most people wouldn't think that way because most people don't have a reference point for Ange's system. The fact that Barkas touched the ball 53 times against Bristol City in that friendly. I mean, that's 20 more than Forster had touched in the prior 5 seasons or 6 seasons. His record high was like 31, and Barkas exceeded that by 20 in one game in a friendly. I mean, there were games where Ange's keeper touched the ball over 70 times in Japan, right? So that's why I talk about the elasticity here as far as stress testing, right? So how's Joe Hart going to do if he touched the ball 70 times in a game? A lot of it being 30, 35, 40 yards away from his goal line. Looks like we might find out. My theory is that may not be ideal, and that might be as big, if not a bigger problem than Barkas having shot stopping problems. And that's not me saying I want Barkas. That's me saying that, the medicine for the disease might be worse than the disease itself. And like I.E. Duffy last season, that's Alan and I had an exchange earlier. It's not a perfect analogy. It's more so, we thought we had a problem defensively and thought that the solution and the medicine was Duffy last season. And I think the keeper problem is bigger. I think we actually do have a keeper issue this season, which is different. I didn't think we had that much of a defensive issue. I thought that was mostly hallucinated, and it was, the real problem was in midfield, not in the center back position. But the medicine kind of created a bigger problem than the supposed disease last season. And I think we face a potentially similar situation. And I cannot. The other part of this that I think is really worrying is I have a hard time coming to a conclusion that this is who Ange would pick, right? Like just happens that Ange picked an Israeli winger who happens to be the client of a certain agent. That it's just not feasible. The coincidences here. So the idea that Ange is getting a list of players and saying, I'll take what I can get because I'm dying for players and we have a huge problem here, versus if there's actually a process going on here where, hey, we've scoped out 4 players, 5 players that all fit your criteria. Which one is the one you prefer, which is how it probably should work, versus, hey, this is the old list that Nicky Hammond came up that brought up or made off to feed whatever Lennon was doing. And here's the leftovers and pick the best one. I mean, that the latter part sounds more plausible to me based off of what's going on. And that's what's the concern. I'm not saying it is, but where there's smoke, sometimes there's fire.
Well, I've brought it up before. There was the interview with Ange when he arrived, talking about Liam Shaw, and he said in that interview that he was handed a list from the scouts of players. So I'm working off evidence that we are working off an old list. We are not working off a new list of scouted players. So that's where the Aaron Hickey rumors cropped up again. That's where the Joe Hart thing's coming from again. So
Irigidi, Starfelt. Yeah. I mean, the only one who looks pretty clearly to have been Ange is Furuhashi.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled with his son. I mean, that was the one that jumps out leaps and bounds. When you look at it from an analytical perspective, you say, my gosh, that makes clear sense. So it's not that, I want to be excited about what's going on. I want to see, good signings and coherent strategy. I want more for Furuhashi and less Joe Hart. Let's put it that way.
Before we move on, because Celtic do have a big Champions League clash in about an hour, 45 minutes. Alan, do you want to finish off on Joe Hart and the general transfers? And, we spoke about a rebuild and potentially director of football and maybe the importance of having all of them working in tandem. We don't have a director of football, so it seems that we're working off the old system that was always in place. Do you want to finish off on the transfers, your final point?
Yeah, sure. I tend to think that depending on your sort of cognitive bias position, you'll choose to blame whoever you want to blame for whatever player Celtic signs. So if it's a good signing and you like Lennon, then you'll hooray Lennon. If it's a bad signing and you don't like Law, you'll blame Law. If it's a bad signing you don't like Desmond, you'll blame Desmond. And then that sort of thinking tends to fill the void of actually knowing what's going on. So what I try and do is look at the actual individual player and treat them on their individual merits, as in, does this signing actually make sense? And I believe, Starfelt, Furuhashi, even the new right back, potentially Buta, that's being rumored that we're going to sign, even Abada to an extent. Fits I can get the reasoning when you look at their attributes as to why the Postecoglou would want to sign them. So I guess I'm kind of okay with all of those. Yeah, I agree that the Joe Hart one doesn't make any sense by that rationale. That's not to pin blame on any individual or that I don't like or what have you, or to bash it was something that I'm had historical issues with. It's just to say it doesn't make any sense from a performance perspective. So yeah, but more Starfelts and Furuhashis and I'll be pretty happy.
Yeah. Before we move on to the FC Midtjylland game, which is kicking off at 6:45, that's not on Celtic TV, by the way. If you're watching in the UK and Ireland, it's only available on whatever stream you can get it, or I don't know if there's a legal platform you can get it on. I don't have it if you can. So anybody who watches
Premier Sports, not that I'm sponsored by them or anything.
It's on Premier Sports then. It's on Premier. If you have Premier Sports, you're okay. But if you don't, if you're watching UK and Ireland, it's not on Celtic TV. It's not being shown.
10 PM rerun on Celtic TV. Sorry, 10 PM rerun on, if you want to do a lightly lads and avoid the score, or it's Stream City.
I think people do well to avoid scores at this point. Robert Arbunkel is saying Barkas' positioning is poor. He's too quiet, indecisive, doesn't come for enough crosses, doesn't marshal his defence. How was he scouted? I'll never know. I think that seemed a bit, his positioning was probably the most worrying thing against West Ham.
I can't defend Barkas, right? I mean, I did a piece on this in the week, right? And he's save percentage is not a great stat for many reasons, but it is a stat, and it does tell you something, right? Especially when you've got if you look at the goalkeepers that you would think, yeah, we're pretty happy, they've got a solid record over years of good performance, i.e. Gordon and Forster are broadly saving 72% of their shots, and you've got Barkas on 51, even if save percentage isn't a great stat, having a 21% difference, are you telling me that the quality of shots that Barkas is facing is so good? And actually, if you look at the way we'd look at that is to look at the post-shot expected goals, which is what was the expected goal value of the shot when it actually reached the goal, and therefore either required saving or it went in. And again, that's a much better metric. But by by that metric, Barkas essentially is saving less shots than the quality of the shots he's faced would suggest he should. Right,
Yeah.
that's really what it is.
Yeah.
Whereas actually Bain is saving slightly more shots than you'd expect. And Bain also is decent with his feet. But I will say this with Barkas. This isn't another Barkas bashing session. Barkas completes 88% of his passing to the distribution point. And James is absolutely right. Barkas attempted 39 passes against Midtjylland in the first leg. A Celtic goalkeeper, going back the last 6 or 7 years, will generally attempt around about 25, 26 passes. That's quite a significant percentage uplift in number of passes. And Barkas, by some distance, is the best distributor by pass completion of all the goalkeepers. So just for balance, I'll chuck that in again.
Well, and because I want to get onto the Midtjylland game too,
Yeah.
Enda, but I'm going to make another point here. It's again, I'd be happy with a replacement for Barkas. My issue is more so that profile of who that replacement's going to be, and a way to try and communicate the importance of that. Alan just mentioned that his passing stats. What I was able to do in StatsBomb is to look at additional metrics and not only look at him versus himself or versus other Celtic keepers, but benchmark versus keepers in the league. And he quite clearly was the best passing keeper across metrics. The other thing that would contradict what I apologize for not remembering the commenter that just had that question or comment, is his metric for basically coming for crosses was good, not towards the top of the league, but much better than Forster.
Yep.
So that was a weakness of Forster's. And if you look at, while his post-shot XG, like he saved less than he should have, because he faced so fewer shots than Forster, the actual goals conceded, he conceded fewer goals. If you take out penalties, which again, that's important. Forster's clearly a better keeper when it comes to confronting penalties. I mean, he's proved that over and over again. And the own goal against Rangers, right, which wasn't his fault on the corner, is he surrendered, or Celtic conceded fewer goals per game with Barkas playing last season than Forster did in 1920. Now, I'm not saying he's a better shot stopper. That's ridiculous. He's not. The data doesn't reflect that. What I'm saying is that the totality of what was going on in those games, he was conceding fewer goals. Now, why was that? I don't have the answer, but there's a lot going on here, coming for balls, organizing a defense. You're not going to tell me that his defense was better put together than the one that Forster had the prior season. So something's not adding up here in that consensus view, which is he can't organize the defense. The shot stopping piece, I completely concede and agree with. Something else is going on, though, that suggests that he's a better keeper than what the consensus is. I'm not saying he shouldn't be replaced. I'd like him to be replaced, but with a better profile. And that means and a ball playing profile.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, well, it's like this. Sometimes you're so desperate to have something done that you rush a decision and you end up getting it madly wrong. So Celtic fans clearly want Barkas out. They clearly don't want him there. But is Joe Hart the answer? Are they going to be happy in 4 months' time when Joe Hart, passes the ball straight to a Rangers player to tap into an empty goal? I mean, that's the risk that Celtic run with going with a player like Joe Hart, who hasn't proven himself to be a good distributor of the ball. So that's the issues. That's the goalkeeping situation. There is a big match tonight. It's 1-1. There's no away goals. Celtic are away to FC Midtjylland in the Champions League second round qualifier. I think general consensus would be that Celtic dominated the first game and all but the red card from Barkas and a few mistakes here and there. It was a pretty good performance. So given that Arne said before the game that he wasn't organised at all, and he said after the game, we're going to be a lot more organised this time. Alan, are you confident going into this?
No. No. So listen, I'm kind of torn here between, again, the evidence before my eyes based on that last game is that Celtic were a much better team. But although the performance itself was actually split into three acts, actually, which is quite neat. There was the first act, which was, bloody hell, what are we doing? What are we doing here? That was the act that involved especially Bitton and Barkas giving the ball away a lot as Celtic struggled to get out of the high press. And that first act lasted pretty much 18 minutes, to be very precise. And then the second act happened, which is Celtic found a way to beat the press and got the ball into Christie, Abada, McGregor, Soro in advanced areas and realised that their Celtic's front five, front six were far superior to their back line in terms of one-on-ones, in terms of pace, in terms of power, and in terms of technical ability. And from that moment, and confidence increased and chances started to be created. Didn't have a shot until the 23rd minute, but then by half time, in fact, over the next sort of 14, 15 minutes, we'd scored a goal and created over 1.4 of expected goals out of those chances. So it was almost as if Celtic, once they got the confidence, once they had the confidence to beat that initial high press, they were able to go at Midtjylland with faster, more skillful players. They realised they could get on top, and then of course the sending off happens. And what Postecoglou then does, which surprised me, is he went well. He didn't surprise me, but then he did. And the reason I say that is because he went to 4-3-2, which didn't surprise me because Postecoglou, front foot, aggressive, attacking manager, he pushed Turnbull essentially as a second centre forward up with Edouard, dropped Christie back into quite a narrow three. And that seemed quite an aggressive attacking move. And I think it was in terms of when they were up against 11 players. But when Midtjylland then had a player sent off, he didn't change that shape. And what actually happened was that Celtic had lost essentially all of their attacking width, because the width came from the two fullbacks at that point. And as we know, Ralston and Taylor, they succeeded with one cross the whole game. They had virtually zero expected assists between them. They created no chances at all. And so actually Celtic became incredibly solid defensively with that 4-3-2, which was something which surprised me as a Postecoglou outcome. But on the other hand, we lost all of our attacking threat once they lost a player and settled back into a more normal 4-4-1 when you're down to 10 players. And it became more difficult for Celtic to create chances. They still did create chances, but actually Midtjylland created all of their chances, such as they were, and they weren't really great chances, long shots, when they'd gone down to 10 men. So I do wonder if perhaps he could have gone a bit more aggressive and put the width back in the game when it went to 10v10. But if you look at the stats by any measure, if you just... So that was the narrative of the game in terms of the different sort of phases of it. But the outcome of all of that was that Celtic had 62% possession. They had 2.22 expected goals to 0.15. They had 15 shots to 3, 10 shots inside the box to 0. They created 12 chances to 2. They had 19 possessions in the box to 11, etc., etc., etc. Their goalkeeper made 3 saves. Barkas didn't make any. By any measure, Celtic dominated that game and should have won it, right? So that should give you confidence. But because I'm not sure we saw a 90-minute performance from either team because of the vagaries of Celtic starting the way they did and the sendings off, I'm still not quite sure what to expect tonight. I'm thinking they can't be as bad as they were because I thought they were pretty poor. I'm thinking confidence has got to have taken a bit of a shake after Saturday's filleting, frankly, of what was put out as being the team that was likely going to start tonight, was put out on Saturday and was just taken apart in the end, and mistakes and everything. It was just horrendous. Postecoglou's some man if he can keep the confidence after that. So based on what am I saying then? So based on just purely stats, Celtic are the better team. We should be confident. But actually, it was a bit of a weird game, and I don't think we'll see the same again. And obviously, we're away from home. Our record in Denmark recently isn't great. We've lost to worse teams than them with much better sides at this stage of the competition. Because although what we saw on last week was brand new shiny tactics and a lot of real positivity about how Postecoglou had got his ideas across in a short period of time with some pretty sort of marginal personnel, we ended up, the result, the outcome, and then Postecoglou's a process guy, not an outcome guy. The outcome was the same shitty outcome we've seen time and time again, which is dominating a game, and then an error means we either get a draw or we lose, and we're out to an inferior side. That outcome is still very much in play, and actually with a 1-1 draw at home was very much what we got last week.
Yeah. See that is the issue. You can dominate the game as much as you want. If you don't win it, you don't win it, and you need to win these Champions League games. James, please tell me you're a little bit more confident. I don't want to be sad going into this game.
Well, I think we have the talent advantage in attack, which gives us a puncher's chance, right? So with a little bit of luck and some good finishing for a change, I think we have a good puncher's chance. So I'm not pessimistic in that sense, meaning that I'm not going in with a complete bereft of confidence. Mm-hmm. My anxiety is why I'm not terribly confident, or I'm kind of hoping we land a huge right cross that knocks them out. I don't think we're going to beat them on points, and I'll tell you why. So in advance of coming on, I knew Alan would have a really good handle on the prior game. So I looked a little bit more at what they've been up to since they played us. And they had a league game against, and my Danish is worse than my French. So I'm just going to say it's AAB, whatever that means. They beat them 1-0. But I think the nature of how they played makes me think that that this was kind of a trial run for them against us. And let me lay out why. So the manager who it was his first, second competitive game against Celtic, came from kind of lower league and then, kind of relegation fighting sides, not front foot attacking sides. Well, they lined up for this league game in a 5-4-1. So they had 3 at the back with 2 wing backs, which is very different than how they set up against us, which I think was 4-3-3 and maybe 4-2-3-1 at times. They had signed a Brazilian left center back that did not play against us, who did start in this game, named Juninho. He looks like their kind of fireman defender with some pace, kind of playing longer balls from deep. So that's a new. Not only shape is different, potentially, they've got, seems like a decent talent level guy. He's a 25-year-old center back that didn't play against us last time. And within that 5-4-1, they made some interesting shifts in other personnel, namely one of their late subs was a 20-year-old who's played mostly center back for them, who went up and played striker. And his name is Onyedika. He's a Nigerian, I think under 19 or under 21-year-old who's played. So bigger guy, but he looks quicker than that Brumada guy. Brumada to me was completely unimpressive in creating problems for our back line. So I think what they're going to do, and they basically conceded 62% possession to this team. So they sat back, let them have possession. That AAB was able to enter their box 24 times, but only got off 3 shots, none on target. So I think what they might do is play a similar setup and look to hit us on the counter. And I think they might, if Brumada might start, they might bring in that other guy who's a little quicker and pacier and athletic. And if you think about Sisto wide left, Paulinho, who was their left back, would now be a wing back. I worry about their left side in that setup with the new center back, Paulinho at wing back, and Sisto facing Ralston and maybe Welsh or Murray, one of the two. And as we saw on Saturday, that's where we really got into trouble. was getting beat for pace and transition.
Yeah.
And so their manager has been quoted in the press as talking about, Celtic really only has one thing to do, is attack. I kind of agree with them. Like, I can't imagine us playing on the back foot and looking to absorb pressure given the nature of our personnel right now. So it seems to me like we kind of know, it's almost like a 17th century war, that's a battle that's going to be fought where everyone kind of knows how everyone's going to line up, and let's just see how it plays out. And that gives me anxiety, meaning that it seems to me that could, result in some us conceding some goals on the break. I'm agnostic on the keeper at this point. Like Alan, I know, wrote a piece kind of saying he would prefer Bain. To me, it's a coin flip given the situation and how it looks like they're probably going to set up. They might press us less forward and advanced. Again, I think that might be a tactic. Maybe all this was a head fake on the weekend. I don't know. But again, that would be, that's my educated guess. I mean, I think that might be how they're going to set up. And, so my puncher's chance is that we win 3-2 or something, that we have a good day of scoring and shooting, and, we're able to break them down or maybe hit some long ones for a change. So that's kind of that's my homework that I did.
It is quite sad that Celtic are going away to, a side in the Danish league, and we're the puncher's chance, that we're the underdogs going into it. But I guess that's just the reality of where we're at the minute. Two areas, and it's interesting that you bring up their press and what they're potentially going to do, that could be an issue for Celtic this morning or tonight, is two areas that we got exposed at against West Ham. So West Ham's goal, the one that everyone screenshotted about Barkas's positioning, was a quick break from them. Celtic had 6 players in the West Ham final third when they won possession back. So I mean, they didn't have many players to go through to get on the break. The second one was Murray's pass out from the back. Murray is likely going to start tonight. I haven't seen the team sheets yet, but he's likely going to be starting given Beaton's absence. So, which is more worrying for you, Alan? Celtic getting caught with a high press trying to play out from the back like they will do, or Celtic being caught trying to implement their high press and being caught on the break?
I'm actually what James says has worried me, because I think it suggests that
oh no.
Well, it suggests that their managers learned from last week, whereas if they do play their own high press and Celtic do break it, which they did, as I say, from about 18-20 minutes out last week, that Celtic are going to cause them all sorts of trouble. And therefore, if they do go more defensive and do sit back and say to Celtic, come on to us, two things, Celtic will struggle with any creativity from the back players. So that ball progression into dangerous players will not be good enough to find the right players in the right positions. And then secondly, obviously, when we get our attacking talent on the ball, you're going to be again in this situation where you're playing against a very kind of low block and a very busy field. The other thing,
I think that also neutralizes Abada to a large degree too. That's my concern on the right.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think if we press them high, we've got a chance of catching them. Because again, if we can isolate defenders one-on-one, Christie gets one-on-one, Abada gets one-on-one, Edouard gets one-on-one, they're better players. They're going to cause trouble. The other thing that's a concern, which the manager came out and said, is they will clearly be focusing on free kicks and set plays in general. We saw the propensity to fall over easily in the first leg. You can expect a lot more of that, and free kicks being. I mean, Midtjylland were one of the poster children for, being able to be innovative and score goals from set plays a few years ago. I don't know if you don't hear so much about it recently, but obviously the goal came from a free kick. But whatever we say about Barkas, there was a long conflab that went on before that shot was taken. So you have to think there was some thinking went into the rationale for whipping in a ball like that with such extreme pace, rather than a more measured sort of cross ball. So they're going to think about every corner and set piece, and they got very few of those in the first leg. They're probably going to get more in this leg just because of the being at home, etc. And that would worry me. We're not a large team, And clearly we're not a defensively well-organised team yet, because that comes with practice and familiarity and communication and quick signals and reaction speeds and people getting into knowing the drill, essentially. And you can't possibly have that with this back line. It's just not going to be there. That would be my main concern, to be fair.
Just one more number to throw at you, Alan. I just looked at it. I hadn't seen it before. Their passes per defensive action in the game on the weekend was 17. So, which is, that AAB team was 4th last season in their league.
Right.
So, so that I would think if they're going to play a similar strategy against Celtic, that you're probably looking at mid-20s or even lower in PPDA, which, to give you an idea, it was just under 10 on Tuesday last week.
So do you want to explain what that means?
Sorry.
Yeah. So real quick, it's basically it's a simple. It's not, again, it's just a gauge. It's a metric. It's basically passes per defensive action. So it's supposed to be a proxy for pressing intensity. How aggressive is a team pushing forward to try and break up play in a defensive way in order to win the ball back? There's much better metrics now. It's one that's been around a long time that still gets used because it's been around a long time and the data is relatively freely available. I think that's, again, that fits with the scenario. And I hope, I'm kind of in Alan's camp. I hope this isn't the case. I hope that maybe they game theory this out and are looking to head fake and they're going to come back in and try to high press us again like they did on Tuesday. And they're trying to fake us out by doing this over the weekend. But I always try to put myself in the shoes of the enemy. And if I was them, I would do exactly what they did on the weekend.
Yeah, that sounds like Neil Lennon tactics to, throw in a fake tactic the week before a game, just in case the opposition are watching. I mean, the rumors are that he named his team in non-numerical order, so they wouldn't know what formation they're playing. So that's right up Neil Lennon streets. Keep your comments coming, keep your predictions coming for the game. Harry Shannon is predicting a 3-2 Celtic win. I'm not sure if he means on the night as in 3-2 or aggregate score 3-2. Daniel Mack says Celtic 2-1. A lot of Celtic people believe in the Celtic are going to win this game. David Bradley is saying 2-0 to Celtic. Stephen Smith is saying 9-0 to Celtic. Abada to score 6, Barkas to score 3. I mean, I like your confidence. I don't think that's going to happen, though. The Celts are here.
Too far from Ibrox having a laugh, I think, that one.
Yeah. The Celts are here. Edouard to score first, Celtic to win 3-1. So there's actually quite a lot of Celtic fans in our comments, at least, that are going with the Celtic winner and confident going into this game. So if Celtic are to win this game, let's say they will win this game, Callum McGregor's role is going to be vital to that, James.
Yeah, I mean, I think and based off, again, going off the premise of if this, the chess match plays out the way that we just spent time speaking about, meaning that they're going to sit back and kind of welcome us onto them, I would think that the probably the two most important players are going to be Turnbull and maybe Soro. I think obviously McGregor is going to be important too, but as Alan said, we're probably not going to get that progressive passing out of our center backs. So I think we need to get that out of Soro, and he has shown that vertical passing at times, but he's also shown some riskiness there. So it's a dual-edged sword. And I think, this is the kind of situation where we're going to need Turnbull's creativity on the ball if he can find the space to do it. And I'll concede a point to Alan. In my rewatch of the game, I was probably too harsh on Turnbull in his performance in the first leg of the tie. He did have a number of really good creative actions that weren't, kind of as easily picked up in the general stats as far as XA, that kind of thing. But it was when he was able to have some space. And again, if they're packing in deep and absorbing pressure in this kind of 5-4-1, we're going to need him to find some space and be creative. Because again, I think we've seen with Edouard has been struggling to break down guys, dribbling through too many defenders. And so to me, those are the two. McGregor's always important. I mean, he's going to keep the ball moving, and maybe make a run in behind to link up with a through ball from, so I think he might be the one that's the recipient of a Soro pass or a through ball from Turnbull, and hopefully he finishes it. So that is important, but I think that creative component, those are the two that I would kind of look to.
Yeah, I guess if it's time to score for Edouard, it's now, because I mean this is likely going to be his last Celtic game by the looks of it. Robert Baker is saying that aggregate score doesn't exist anymore. Aggregate score is still a thing. Away goals are not. So there is still aggregate. So the 1-1 draw still counts, and then it goes to extra time or penalties if the aggregate score is still level. So that's how the game is working tonight. So if it's 1-1 at full time, then it's going to go to extra time, and vice versa. So if it goes 3-2 to Celtic, then Celtic go through. So it all depends on the scoreline. Away goals don't count. That's the only difference to this year from last year. Alan, final thoughts on this game then? Get your prediction.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest threat to them was down the flanks was Christie and Abada, and therefore that's why I think again they're going to look to avoid that situation or to counter that as much as possible. McGregor was tidy last week. I know he got man of the match. Soro was the most effective at breaking lines from the passing, and I don't think we're going to see a lot of that from the defenders. So based on the way they set themselves up, I think it's not going to be actually that high scoring game. I think it's going to be really, really tight. And at the end of the day, it comes down to we've got to take our chances and not make any stupid errors at the back. And our confidence in is Edouard going to really, really extend himself to the absolute nth of his degree to get a goal for Celtic tonight. If a move is pending, you got to have your doubts, haven't you? And that's the main goal threat. Whereas at the other end, can you expect Murray, Welsh, whoever's in goal, Ralston, Taylor not to be exposed at some point? So I would love us to sneak a 1-0. I think we've got to have a bit of good fortune along the way, which doesn't tend to happen in these games, as we've seen over the years.
Sorry to interrupt, Alan. We do have the team news.
Okay.
It's come through on the UEFA website. So Scott Bain is in goals. Barkas is dropped. It's a back four of Taylor, of Murray, of Ralston and Welsh. Then you have Christie, Turnbull, and Soro. Christie, Soro, Turnbull. Sorry, it's not in the correct order. Abada is starting. McGregor is starting. Yeah. And so is Edouard. So it's actually it's an unchanged team from apart from Scott Bain. So back 4-4-3-3. It's Turnbull, McGregor, and Soro in midfield, with Christie, Abada, and Edouard up front, with the back four of Taylor, of Welsh, Ralston, and Murray. So that's the Celtic starting lineup. After seeing that, or after hearing that, I guess there's not much change to our analysis, but I guess it confirms that Scott Bain is starting. Scott Bain, James, what are your thoughts? Is he good enough for this level?
Probably not, but I think my concern would be more so. I think he's fine for this game. I could, because if we're not going to face a high press, I'd be more concerned if we were going to face more of a high press. But I think, because I agree with Alan. I mean, he's functional with his feet. I think he's a little bit more dicey when he's put under pressure. So I think he'll be fine. He's had some games where he's really come up big with some good shot stopping. I think, given the option of the two, I have no problem with Bain being selected, particularly if it looks like we're moving on from Barkas. So we don't really have to worry about confidence or any of that kind of thing. So given the circumstances, I mean, it might be the least bad option that we have.
What's your prediction then for the night?
So I'm hoping for. I'm a little contrary to Alan. I think if Celtic's going to win this, I think we probably need to score first, relatively early, and then that might open the game up a little bit, and then we might beat them 3-2. So I'm gonna stick with 3-2, and hope that we score early, and then, because I don't see how we get out of this with a clean sheet. I mean, I'd love it. I mean, I would really love it, but I'm not sure. And then another big fear I have is because of how young we are. Alan's point about the weekend and the potential damage that could have done to confidence. These guys are going to be rip-roaring in effort, really trying. And sometimes, as we saw with Welsh's rash tackle that led to the free kick, I worry about cards in this situation with young players like this. And if we're absorbing pressure, or they're absorbing pressure and hitting us on the counter, that's probably my biggest fear, is a red card or something calamitous in that regard. Because these young guys, I mean, I really feel for them. I mean, Murray and Welsh are really put in a tough spot here. Yeah. God love them. I hope they step up. I hope they have the biggest games of their lives and, defy all the odds. So.
Yeah, well, see, that is my main concern. Is I do think Murray does concern me in terms of his distribution, and it's unfair that he's in this position at 18 years old to be beside Welsh, who's 20 years old, 19 years old, centre backs for Celtic in a crucial Champions League qualifier. I mean, this could define Murray's Celtic career, these sort of fixtures, because if he gets the idea or the narrative starts to form around him that he's not good enough for the big games at 18 years old, then come 4 years time, are people still going to believe in that? So I feel sorry for Murray. I really hope he has a good game. That's what I'm hoping that I really hope that he doesn't give away a goal like he did against West Ham, because these are the games that do matter. So I'm going to be different. I'm going to go with a Celtic win. I think Celtic are going to just about scrape this. It does make it a little bit more difficult with PSV winning in the next round, but I think you want to win as many games as you can. You want to get as far as you can in each tournament. So I'm going with a Celtic win. Do keep the comments coming in the comments below about your predictions and your thoughts on Barkas, or your thoughts on Joe Hart coming to the club. This is the Huddle breakdown. Sorry, James.
I'm sorry. Do you have the Midtjylland lineup? Is that out yet?
I do have the Midtjylland lineup. So according to UEFA, they've gone with a 5-3-2. So that's what they played the weekend, is it?
They played 5-4-1. I'm curious, who do they have listed as the second striker?
So they've gone with a starting lineup of Lossell in goals, Dalsgaard, Suyachenko, Paulinho as the centre backs. Juninho is playing left wing back. Anderson.
They have that backwards.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
unconscious bias there.
This is
getting the Brazilians mixed up, but that's
this is UEFA's team anyway. Paulinho is playing left centre back. Juninho is playing left wing back. Anderson right wing back. Evander, Mabile, and Charles are playing with the three in the middle, and Brumado and Sisto are the front two.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that's the 5-4-1 that's basically what they lined up with the weekend. Mabile will probably be the right-sided midfielder, Sisto left-sided. They have two Andersons. It sounds so. Evander will probably be the left midfielder, inside midfielder, and the one Anderson as the inside right, and then the other wing back will be the longer spelled Anderson, who's I think a Swedish national.
Okay. And just in case you missed it, Celtic starting lineup was out as well. Scott Bain starts in goals. Barkas has been dropped. Anthony Ralston, Welsh, Murray and Taylor make up the back four. Sorrow, McGregor and Turnbull are in midfield, with Abada, Edward and Christie working as the front three. This was the Huddle Breakdown. We're the podcast that look at the performance, XG and stats of Celtic. If you want to catch us on podcasts, you can get us on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and you'll get notified every time it goes live. And do rate us as well. Give us a rating on iTunes because it gives it a nice little boost in the rankings as well. We are also on Twitter at Huddle Breakdown if you want to follow us, and you can subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Much more than just this show on the YouTube channel, but you will get everything that goes out on the Huddle Breakdown as well if you subscribe. So just hit the subscribe button below. Alan and James, thanks very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck with your streams, guys.
Oh well, let's hope we can actually watch this game. All right, enjoy the game, folks. Hopefully Celtic get a win, and we might even do a reaction video. Who knows? I'm not much of a loser. I might actually go back on the YouTube channel and react, good or bad, to this Celtic performance. But enjoy the game. Hopefully we get a win, and we'll chat to you later.